Welcome to the Polygamer podcast, where gaming is for everyone. Join us as we expand the boundaries of the gaming community.
This is your host, Ken Gagney, this week on Polygamer.
I want everybody who's like me or people that are more marginalized than me, I want their voices to be heard. I want them to be represented. I want them to have a place at the table. I want them to have a controller in their hands. I want to have games made for them.
That's Philip Jones, director of Gaming in Color, a documentary that just released on May 19th, all about the intersection of the LGBT community and the video game community. You may recall that Polygamer previously examined this topic when we interviewed Matt Kahn on the very first episode of Polygamer. Matt Kahn is the co-founder of the annual convention GamerX in San Francisco, which I have backed on Kickstarter 3 years in a row, and he is also the CEO of Midboss, the publisher of Gaming in Color, and I back Matt on Patreon as well. Just wanted to get all those potential conflicts of interest out of the way, but as a backer of the GamerX Kickstarter, I received a free copy of Gaming in Color, which is how I got to view the documentary prior to its 2015 release, because it did enjoy a limited release in 2014 and now is widely available in 2015. This week's episode is the first of 2 consecutive episodes featuring directors of documentaries. 2 weeks from now, on June 10th, you'll be hearing from Shannon Sun Higginson, director of GTFO, a film about women in the gaming industry. I don't normally feature 2 very similar roles on this show consecutively, but the topics were sufficiently diverse and just too timely to pass up, because GTFO is coming out on June 9th. I encourage you to check out both films. You'll be finding out more about GTFO in the next episode of Polygamer, but for Gaming in Color, go to gamingincolor.tv, easy to remember, where you can find the film on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, PlayStation, Xbox, Gumroad, Vimeo, VHX, and Vudu, with more to come, so I'm told, in this episode, which you're about to hear with Philip Jones, director of Gaming in Color. Thank you to Matt Kahn for making the connection, and if you'd like to show your appreciation for this interview and this show, please leave a review on iTunes. It really means a lot. Not just because you're stroking my ego, but because reviews in iTunes actually feed into the podcast discovery mechanism and help more people discover this show and the topics we're discussing. So you can do your part to advance diversity and equality in gaming by supporting podcasts like Polygamer and Less Than or Equal. Thanks so much for listening. Here's the show. Today I have the honor of chatting with the director of the documentary Gaming in Color, Philip Jones. Hello, Philip.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Wonderful. I am excited and I am busy, but this is fun. I like doing this kind of thing.
I can imagine. As we are chatting, the film Gaming in Color comes out, well, it came out yesterday, in fact, on Tuesday the 19th. And we are airing this podcast on May 27th, so you've had about a week now to catch your breath, or conversely, to be extremely busy conducting even more interviews like this one. But thank you for taking some time out of the lull before the storm to chat with Polygamer.
So if it came out yesterday, I could be in the hospital right now, just depending on how things go.
Oh no, the hospital.
I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to put out this big gay gaming movie. It's going to be out on like people's PlayStations. I don't know how people are going to react.
You could be a billionaire. It could be that popular.
We'll see. I'm hoping, get us some cool press, and we'll try to make the magic happen. I know we've got some cool stuff lined up, so we'll see how this week goes.
Well, I'm happy to collude with you and get some press out there.
I guess the listeners know better than I do at this point.
So before we talk about what's in the film and people's perception about it, I want to talk a little bit about the origin of the film, because it originally went on Kickstarter about 2 years ago, early 2013, and it was seeking $125,000, but before that project closed, it was voluntarily canceled and then relaunched with a budget of $50,000. What changes made that lower goal possible?
I actually was not part of the film process, nor was Midboss, until late 2013. So I wasn't even an employee of Midboss at that point. So I couldn't tell you what happened with that first Kickstarter. I think that people were really ambitious to get the project off the ground, and they made a cool campaign, but they didn't really have a lot of press behind it and didn't have a lot of sway. And, after the first 2 weeks, if your Kickstarter is going nowhere, then I think a lot of people can always tell, this isn't gonna happen. So instead of just failing with that campaign and having that on their shoulders, I think that they came up with an excuse to relaunch it. And I think that at that point, the second campaign actually did have Mid-Boss's influence. And then that one was actually ultimately successful. So I don't think any changes were made besides just, trying to get more attention to the film and maybe present the campaign better. Because we've had a lot of experience running Kickstarters.
So you were brought on board to direct this film. This film is not your brainchild.
No, actually, I was brought on to be the assistant/project manager originally because we were having a hard time getting everybody to actually stay focused on the project and continue working on it. So it was my job to actually try to get everybody else to be doing their job, actually making the film. And eventually that was just not going to happen. So eventually, instead of just letting it be a dead project and, not sure what to do with all that money, Mid-Boss, we just acquired the film rights. And just because I was already so heavily involved with the project, I sort of naturally just filled the role of director, and everything else that we had done past that point was my vision. Everything that had been filmed by the time that I joined up was the GamerX convention, and that was it.
Did you have any experience as a film director that you brought to this project?
God, no. No, none of us did. Me nor Matt, but we've been in the game industry for a while. And we know how to sell a product. We know what looks good. We know how to be entertaining. So we all brought that to the table. And then we hired this guy named Ryan Paul, who's this really talented cinematographer and video editor who basically put the whole film together according to, how we shot it and how we wanted the film to lay out, hitting the points that we wanted to cover. So we did hire somebody that has, a documentarian to actually put it together. We were not going to be able to do that all by ourselves. But no, besides him, none of us had any, film experience or anything,
Kind of reminds me of Superman 2, where they filmed most of the movie with Richard Donner, and then they let him go and brought in a new director, because I saw a lot of footage in the Kickstarter trailer for your film. And having just watched the film yesterday in preparation for this interview, I didn't see any of the trailer's footage in the actual movie. So there must have been some big change at some point about what the film was going to be about or how you're going to go about it or what footage you were going to use.
Oh, the Kickstarter trailer, actually, we just took people just to be in the trailer. None of those people are actually supposed to be in the film.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know why that decision was made. That had nothing to do with me. I feel like they should have just, interviewed them for the film after they were already, tied to the project. But, they put together a really cool trailer. Keith Curson, he's a cool guy. We got to put his face on the thumbnail, so, that probably helped us with a little bit of the fundraising. He's a cutie.
And I noticed that among your 1,026 Kickstarter backers, 2 of them actually did end up in the film. The little subtitle that pops up to identify them, their role as opposed to film critic or website editor or whatever is Kickstarter backer. How did you identify those 2 people out of the 1,000 that gave you money?
So we actually had a high tier where anybody who pledged $500 or more was guaranteed a spot in the film. And we ended up having about 6 people choose that reward, but we were only able to actually film the 2. The other 4 either were international or did not want to be in the film or could not make time for it within our schedule.
Oh, that's right. I see that now. $500 reward. If you get to LA or San Francisco, we'll interview you as part of the film.
Yep.
Wow.
And one of those took place at the GamerX convention because I was a fan of GamerX. And the other one we shot, actually, George Dowdy, we shot at the first QGCon on the UC Berkeley campus. And we should have shot more of that conference, but it was sort of small and guarded, and everything was happening inside a room, so there wasn't actually much that we could actually film there, which was unfortunate because that was a really cool event.
I imagine as director, there were certain people you wanted to interview. How did it feel to be told by the people who managed the Kickstarter, you have to include these 2 people?
No, I didn't have any problem with having to include the Kickstarter backers. I think it was more just an issue of scheduling, and then we have to hire, a camera guy, for an extra day. That was fine. Anybody that I wanted to be in the film, the major blockers to that were actually, we could not travel, and, we can't pay for anybody. We had no budget and no time by the point that I had come on the project. So, anybody that we would want, we would have had to have found locally. And by locally, I mean in New York, because that's where our filmmaker was at the time. So a lot of the cast members that you see are actually New York based, and that's why.
Interesting. I also just saw the film GTFO by Shannon Sun Higginson, and I
Yes.
think you like that film?
I got to see the premiere at South by.
Oh, excellent.
I was there when it first launched, and I met Shannon, and she was really cool. And we exchanged DVDs and emails, and we are we want to work together in the future. So cool things might happen down the line with Gaming in Color and GTFO. We'll see.
Yeah, she's swell. At the time that you and I are recording this, I just interviewed her yesterday for Polygamer,
Oh,
and that episode will air 2 weeks from now on June 10th.
did she say anything nice about me?
Yes, after I told her that you said nice things about her.
We always try to give each other a nod in interviews because people ask me the scope of the film. What's the response been, or has there been any criticisms, or what was the scope of your film, or they'll bring up some recent happening, and usually those are really good segues for me to be like, if my film didn't cover this, one of these other ones did, like GTFO or Game Loading. Especially Transgeek movie, which is still in production, but I'm really looking forward to that one. So there's this really cool just little group of indie docs about marginalized people in games, and they're all coming out right now, and it's really, really cool to be a part of that, because I don't think this has ever really happened. Video game movies have been made before, everybody knows Indie Game the movie, and that was highly successful. And I think, it's not that any of us are trying to replicate that. We all have passions and, our own motivations for making a film, what we think is important. And, I just think it's so cool just to be able to be a part of that and say this, Gaming in Color exists on its own, but it's not the only one. It's almost like a sort of package deal. If you want the full scope of what's going on right now, there are these other films that are coming out right now that tell similar stories, and we're all loosely connected to each other, and we're all friends, and, I've met them all, and I've been to the premieres, I went to the premiere of Game Loading as well, and, it's so cool.
So what is it that prompted this film, Gaming in Color, to happen now? For example, GTFO, it's timely because of everything that just happened with Gamergate, but Shannon happened to actually have just finished filming that movie 2 months before Gamergate. But
Yep.
she had seen other incidences on a smaller scale happen, and they all sort of piled up. And she said, "I need to compile these into a film."
Yep.
What happened with Gaming in Color? Obviously, the convention Gamer X is about 2 or 3 years old, and that seems to coincide with the production of this film. Was there some synergy there that prompted this film to start?
Yeah, absolutely. The original filmmakers were friends with somebody who used to work on the convention. And they had seen a lot of great press because GamerX was buzzing at the time, before it was the first time. We were getting a lot of mainstream gay coverage. And, so we had connections to filmmakers, and they had decided, this is really cool. We want to make a documentary about this. And, GamerX was like, oh, okay. So you can come and film, and, we'll boost it, and we'll be happy to be part of that. Of course, if somebody tells you, we want to make a movie about you, what are you going to say? Of course. So it was definitely hugely inspired by the GamerX convention, and that's why that was the thing that was filmed, that we didn't have to, cover ourselves.
And of course, the co-founder of GamerX, Matt Kahn, and he was the executive producer on this film and is the CEO, I believe, of Midboss, which is the publisher of the film. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And he was the very first guest on the very first episode of Polygamer. I don't know that we would have launched this podcast without him.
Aww.
And I've backed all 3 Gamer X's on Kickstarter, but I did not back Gaming in Color for anybody who's looking for a conflict of interest. That one doesn't exist. Lots of others, but not.
So you gave Matt money, but not me. I see how it is.
I find out about these things too late. Like GTFO, I just found out about it a month ago, and I'm like, where was I?
Yeah, I always try to boost the other films when I can. I compiled this really cool list of 8 different marginalized people in games, or just marginalized people documentaries that were coming out around that time, and I put that out as a Kickstarter update. And I know that included GTFO, and that included Game Loading, and that included Indie Game Jam, or Super Indie Jam. Oh God, they're gonna hate me. I'm forgetting the name of their film. It's Super Game Jam. Yeah. Super Game Jam is really cool. It's like a 5-part documentary about making a game within a game jam, within 48 hours. And other ones like She Got Game and No Princess in the Castle both had successful Kickstarters. I haven't heard about either of those films in a while, so I believe that they're still in production, but they're both about women in games as well. So But yeah, the GamerX convention was the first inspiration for gaming in color, and then the scope expanded. Some of our one of our criticisms was like somebody said that we just used the film to make a commercial for GamerX, but I was like, okay, well, GamerX was literally the one thing that I did not film and was just handed off to me. So everything else that the film covers was beyond GamerX. So everything everything that I actually put into this film was not GamerX. So
That actually raises a question I had, which is that the documentary mentioned how the anonymity of the internet allows people to be jerkwads.
Yeah.
Do you find that a lot of that hostility or bigotry also happens offline, where people are in person? Like, I imagine that people are not going to GamerX and being dicks, are they?
No, we've never had any problems about harassment or people being bigoted at GamerX. GamerX is really cool because we try to we have a really intensive volunteer training little seminar that we hold. So everybody that volunteers for the convention wants to be one of our sprites, is what they're called. The night before the convention, we take them out and we give this whole seminar about how to be a moderate of an inclusive space, and then we'll give examples of like these are the things that can be said and are common within social circles, but these are problematic because blah blah blah. And they usually have to do with statements being made that center white cis guys at the focal point of the discussion and sort of like assume them by default within a video game space. So all of our volunteers are trained and know and understand these types of situations. So we never have any problems with volunteers. And then everybody that is if a situation were to come up, then we trust all of our volunteers to be able to know how to handle that. And if something big did happen, then we would step in. But we've never had any problems at the convention. We've really been able to be successful in creating a safer space, because I think that if that's something that we really strive for, and if we say that a lot, then I think people will start to understand that it's something that's really important to us. We want to be inclusive of everybody. We want everybody to feel like they have a space here, and that they're heard, and that they're included, and that they're this is a safer space that they can come to. And if any situation were ever to arise, then it would be handled quickly and thoroughly. But I don't think that anybody would come to GamerX looking to start trouble. And if they did, then that would be sad, but it would be able to be handled with. So, it wouldn't be the end of the world by any means.
For people who see the safe space that this convention provides as a threat to what they consider the traditional gaming industry, have they taken offense or seen gaming in color as any sort of threat? Have you received any negative outburst or feedback, or do you expect that to happen once the film comes out?
I expect it to happen once the film comes out. So that's what the joke was about earlier, because I don't know how, I know that if gaming in color was so large that everybody on gaming internet knew about it, then it would definitely, absolutely be. And GamerX has, the personal lives of the founders and directors of GamerX have been trudged through, and, lots of threads and topics and people wasting their lives on that. But gaming in color as a product has not been heavily targeted. I haven't been heavily targeted because of gaming in color. I was on Breitbart.com for like the Milo guy put me in a Breitbart article, so I was on the front page of Breitbart, and I got people in my Twitter mentions for about half a day, but they got bored with me. That was not sustained. So it was not traumatic by any sense. We'll see how the film goes. We did have a screening on Twitch. This is something really cool that Devolver set up. They did Twitch movie nights, where the official Twitch channel, like twitch.tv/Twitch, was streaming movies from Devolver's catalog, and we actually got to be a part of that. And they streamed us they started at 4 p.m. and streamed us 10 times over the course of the whole day. So, it was just playing on repeat, till 2 a.m. And over the course of that, we had a combined, 20,000 some odd viewers to that channel seeing the film. During that time, around the second or third screening, once people started to pay attention to it, because it was on the front page of Twitch, you couldn't go to twitch.tv without seeing it. There were a lot of people that suddenly showed up that had a huge problem with the film and wanted to talk about it in the Twitch chat room, and they wanted to say things about the women in our film, and they wanted to make a lot of assumptions and say a lot of hurtful things, and, slurs are funny. And there was a 4chan thread that was made about it, which was, deleted before we could actually see the contents, but it was there. So, I think that, anytime that the film is going to exist in a mainstream gaming space, just for the nature of what it is, that's going to attract a lot of negative attention. So, we're anticipating that. I know that there's going to be some kid who's going to turn on his Xbox, who's going to go in the store and stumble over our film by accident. And, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Just the very nature that Gaming in Color is going to exist on, game consoles, I think is a really cool achievement of the film. And, achievement. That was not a pun, but
but it was a good one.
No, it wasn't. I look forward to it. I want to see how people will respond to the film coming from a very neutral standpoint. I think that we tried so hard. One of my biggest directions with the film was, if we're not making this to be educational, and if we're not making this to try and show people what we're going through, if we're just here to preach to the choir, then what's the point of even making it? We're not going to get anywhere with that. In the interests of being moderate and reasonable and trying to make the film come off as relatable, the film's scope was not as large. So people that are really well versed in this stuff might, want more, but it's also, they're just going to feel happy just because it's presented so positively. So, but in that same vein, most mainstream gamers find our film to be radical and progressive and super far left and, almost ridiculous. And anytime that I've gotten somebody who's, either super committed to being an ally or even not a gamer, people are really receptive, and they've actually said, you should cover these topics further. I want to know more about this. So, hitting that one line, just seeing the different responses from all of these different groups that are seeing the film is wild. I don't know what to anticipate when somebody sees the film for the first time. It's really hard to be told at the same time that you're going too far and then you're not going too far enough for all of these different people. But I think that, one thing that we just wanted to do was just be educational and just be relatable and try to be a force and just, be a resource for people to go to. If you're dealing with somebody who's on the internet who's I don't understand why gay people want to play video games or why they want to be in video games. What does being gay have to do with video games at all? Why can't we just all be the same people? I think that people are really, really tired with answering questions like that. And, it's going to take a lot of effort to answer a question like that because there's going to be follow-up questions. You have to provide resources and, and blah, blah, blah. So my vision was that whenever somebody's dealing with a person who has questions like that or has concerns or just doesn't get it or even disagrees and says gay people shouldn't be in video games, then they can just say, hey, go watch Gaming in Color because that will change your mind. That's what I envision for the film. That's the most that I could ever hope for.
No, I think that's a great goal and a very reasonable one. It's one of the same reasons why I had Matt on this show last summer, because I was asking him all the exact same routine, frustrating questions that you just mentioned, because I had those questions, and Matt was generous enough with his time to come on the show and entertain those questions for me, understanding that I really was coming from a place of naivete, and he knew that once he answered those questions, it would form this record, the Polygamer podcast, that I could now point people to and say, hey, if you had the same questions I did, Matt already answered them for me.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that when we first released, we were for pay what you want. So the vast, vast majority of people that were watching our film only paid $1 for it, which in my mind was fine, because that meant to me that they were likely people that wouldn't have otherwise supported this. And because it was $1, they were able to actually put in $1 and watch it. And, maybe that actually was able to spread, the activism that the film holds in a much wider scope. Unfortunately, we've had to substitute that for wider platforms. Now that we're going to be out on all these major things, the visibility of the film is going to drastically increase. And unfortunately, we don't control the price. I would have loved to have kept it at pay what you want, but that's just not feasible when you're out on all these platforms. So I think that after we were out for a year, on pay what you want, I think that now was the time to actually go full VOD, and I think that that's a sacrifice that we were definitely willing to make. Anything in the interest of getting the film in more people's hands and their awareness. And I think that most gamers can't go through the internet, whether they're going on Kotaku or Polygon or some other somewhat progressive game site. I think that this is a topic that people can't escape anymore, which is a weird thing to say. But everybody should be aware that there is something that is gay and video games. And I think that, if they see it more and more and more, and it's all around them, then, I think that people are going to eventually, they're just going to have to understand it or have to look into it, and they can't just ignore it and can't just be bigoted. And I think that most people who are interested in video games and not in the typical, gamer sense, are going to be the most positive forces behind this sort of movement. Not like, the average everyday gamers, even though that's who we're speaking to, because we know that's who we meet the most resistance with.
I want to talk more about the film's content, but since the topic came up, let's take a brief tangent to its distribution.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the film coming out on May 19th, but as you just mentioned, the film has already been out, and that's how I was able to watch it. So tell us a little bit about what its prior availability was like and why that changed.
Yeah, we did not have a premiere in the sense that most films do. We did not have a release film festival run. We didn't really have a great festival run back in when we began. We've had a decent one since then, but not once we first started. So it was really hard for us to get off the ground. So we decided, we were at that time, maybe not in the best, mindset for success of the film, but we just wanted the film to get out. We just wanted people to be able to see it because we had been working on it for a while, and we thought that this was something really cool. So we just wanted everybody to see it. We wanted people to talk about it. We wanted this to exist. So we self-published it, and we put it out on this really amazing platform called VHX, which is a video streaming, video on demand service that you can either buy or rent, or, it's a really, really cool dynamic website. And we already knew that, we had 1,000 some Kickstarter backers. So we know at least, by release, we're going to have around 1,000 people that have a copy of the film. So that was, a good motivation for releasing it. So we put it out on VHX. We had our own VHX website. It was pay what you want with a minimum of $1. We suggested $10. Not a lot of people did that, but some people did. If we knew them, or if they were just really cool people and wanted to support the cause, and this is something that's important to them as a queer person, then we actually did get a lot of financial support through that. But it was more important for us just to be, able for, out and where everybody can see it. And we had some good press lined up around then. Not amazing, but good. We have our own we have our own contacts, through GamerX, and, people recognized us as the GamerX people. So yeah, it was a decent run. And I think that eventually we got to the point where the film wasn't going to go anywhere without some outside help. And we saw other films around us, like Super Game Jam, like getting released on platforms. And, we started talking to them, and they're like, well, we got it through Devolver. And we're like, doesn't Devolver just do games? But, they opened up their own film company, which is something that, not a lot of people are aware of if they only know video games. So we were able to establish a connection with them, and they fell in love with the film, and they've been amazing. Andy Grace is one of the coolest ladies that I've ever met, and I love getting to work with her. She is super helpful and awesome. And they were the ones who were able to get us out on these platforms because they have an established connection, with iTunes and blah, 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 and any of the other platforms that are hard or expensive to, get yourself on. And even if you do, submit yourself as a no-name indie, there's no guarantee that you're going to make it. So this sort of distributor is very, very important. And luckily we were able to still establish that connection after so long after the release.
So for those who already saw the film on VHX, the film coming out now is the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there going to be a physical media release, like a DVD or Blu-ray?
Not that we've planned. We could eventually do that, but I don't think that the demand is there. I think that for something like this is something that people will definitely want more digitally. We did run a string of DVDs because we included them as backer awards in our Kickstarter and also our GX3 Kickstarter. So a lot of people do have DVDs, and we pass them out, when we go to conventions, and it's a good way of getting the film in people's hands when you're physically there. But in terms of like marketplaces, people definitely want digital.
Sure, I see that. The one opportunity I see that physical media has, besides in-person distribution, as you mentioned, is also getting it into the hands of certain communities or groups like libraries or LGBT communities in various parts of the country.
Yep, we've actually been able to be in a couple of those. I couldn't name any off the top of my head just because everything moves so fast, but people have reached out for us and we've sent them DVDs, so I know that they exist somewhere.
Oh, good. One of the things I talked to Shannon about was her approach to this topic, because she considers herself a casual gamer, not a hardcore gamer. And on one hand, some people might criticize her by saying, you're a fake geek girl, you have no right talking about this topic. On the other hand, they might say, oh, well, you're not in this community, you're not trying to change it for your own benefit, you're just an outsider who has a unbiased perspective on it. So it kind of worked both ways for her. This topic of gaming in color is one that you and Matt Kahn are very much invested in.
Yes.
What was it like trying to produce a film that you have a stake in the subject matter?
I think that's the only way that I could, because this is so personal to me, and it was something that I was already involved in. It was something that I was becoming increasingly more aware of at the time when I picked up the film. I think now I have a much greater knowledge and, sort of community awareness of what's going on in queer people in games right now. But, and I think that, my sort of, limited scope back then only served the film and its limited scope and its, relatability and educational potential. But I wouldn't have just picked up a film if it wasn't personal. Why would I go and make a documentary about Big Ben? I don't know anything about that. This is something that I knew and something that I cared about, and everything that I envisioned for the film meant something to me. Everything that I say when I say I want this film to do this, or I want the queer games community to be this, or I just want game culture to be this. I want game companies to be doing this. I want people to listen to us. I want everybody who's like me or people that are more marginalized than me. I want their voices to be heard. I want them to be represented. I want them to have a place at the table. I want them to have a controller in their hands. I want to have games made for them. This is the only way that I've been able to figure out how to do that best for other people. This and the convention and now making our own game that is catered towards queer people that never get a game.
So you admit that this movie is part of the gay agenda.
It is. Every documentary has an agenda. Are you kidding? Every documentary has an agenda. Anybody who tells you that they don't is lying. Even super historical, factual documentaries have an agenda, because somebody has to direct them. And my agenda has always been on display, and people can talk to me in person and get a sense of who I am as a person. And I think that who I am as a person complements the film, and I think who we are as a company complements the film, and I think that GamerX and Read Only Memories complement the film. I think GTFO and Game Loading and Trans Movie complement the film. I think everybody that's supported the film and everybody that's in the community and everybody that's doing something really cool complements the film. I don't think that it could ever be something that's on its own, that doesn't have strong ties to everything else that is video games and everything else that is queer.
So that's why it seemed natural, for example, to have Matt Kahn in the movie, because you really are making a movie about yourself in a way and your own community. Normally you wouldn't see the executive producer of a movie in the movie, but how can you not feature one of the co-founders of GamerX in a film about the LGBT community in gaming?
Well, like I had said, Matt Kahn that interview was filmed at the GamerX convention. So that was done by the original filmmakers. Matt Kahn was going to be their star. And then when Midboss picked up the film, he became part of the crew as well. So everything that was in the film that was comes off as self-promotion was already done, and it wasn't something that we had our fingers in. And, we weren't just going to throw it out because we want people to know about GamerX, and we want this, GamerX is historical. It's a really big part of queer games now. It's the only thing that's ever happened like this. So I think that it's a really good topic for any documentary. I understand why the other filmmakers wanted to do it.
If this documentary were about women in games, which is a hot topic right now, we would know who the quote-unquote celebrities are. If you want to talk about women in games, you have to represent Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn, Brianna Wu, Leah Alexander, and the like. Who are the celebrities of the LGBT community? Who did you go into this film saying, we need to have these people in this movie?
Oh God. I like I said, we had no time and no budget to be able to film just anybody that we wanted.
Were there people you wanted to interview that you couldn't get a hold of?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Maddie Bryce, for instance, actually agreed to be part of the film, but we were not able to be in the same place at the same time before our deadlines. So that was somebody that we were not able to film, and she would have been a really amazing asset to the film. And I know that she's brilliant and would have brought a lot to the table. So that was one thing that we were not able to do just because we were picking up a dead project. On all sense and purposes. There was nothing that was attached to this besides, the few interviews and the film. All of the Kickstarter money was gone by that point. And, we as a company were not like rolling in dough, spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars on GamerX. So it was really difficult. I mean, I have made a comprehensive list of people that I think are amazing and people that I would like to have in the next film. So I have those names in mind, and I have a lot of people that I know that continue to inspire me. So if I was going to make another film, that I would definitely know who I would want to have and who I wouldn't want to have, and for what reasons. In terms of like who's the celebrities, I think that most well known besides Matt himself, that would be David Gator of BioWare, the gay man who writes Dragon Age and Mass Effect and all the BioWare games, because he has come out himself and done a lot of his social queer work through the games, and has done a lot in getting internally the company to go in that direction, and include LGBT people in their video games. And I think that he's a really well-known name for doing that. So, especially in terms of like a major company. So I think that he could probably be up there. There are a lot of contenders, and I could just go on all day, about people that I enjoy or people that I think are brilliant. But in terms of like actual mainstream presence and scope, it's probably David Gator.
Anybody who wants to follow him on Twitter can find him at David Gator. That's DavidGaider. Now, this film, Gaming in Color, was ostensibly about the LGBT community, but I didn't see a lot of the T. I didn't see a lot of transgender issues being discussed. Why was that?
That was, there is trans representation in the cast, and we tried to highlight the games that are made by a lot of great trans and genderqueer game creators, especially in the indie scene, or just queer games as a community and people that we know. If we would have loved to have more trans people, in the cast and more trans topics covered. Unfortunately, like I said, our scope in the cast was cut much shorter than we had expected. And while we do bring up these topics, there was not an avenue that we could take to expand that, while trying to manage everything else. And there's no good excuse for that. It's definitely a failure of the film. And, like I said, I think that everything else in our company has showed our commitment to trans people. We don't want to be seen as a mainstream gay company that leaves out trans people, because that's very often the case, right? So I think that our work with GamerX and Read Only Memories and just everything that people know about us personally, I myself am non-binary. And that's something that I should have really crusaded for more in the film, as trans representation, because of who I am and the people that I love. Yeah, unfortunately, it was just something that we were not able to accomplish in the long run. And it was something that we were concerned about before we released the film. It was definitely something that we were aware of, and we knew that, this documentary is not complete without it, and the cause is not complete without that being more heavily represented. Every time that somebody has brought that up to me, I've always pointed them towards Trans Geeky Movie, and I said, hopefully when this film comes out, they will right our wrongs and be able to, cover these things that we were not able to. If another film ever gets made, then the focus on that will absolutely be given much more of a presence, because then we will be in a better position to be able to control, how the film turns out on a much better scale, with more funds and more time and more, direction, and who we're able to get, and, traveling and follow stories and, all sorts of things. And, the trans people that were in the film were, either uncomfortable or just did not bring up their own identities and did not discuss that. And that was something that we respected. It's a really hard thing to bring up. And I think that it was something that we should have done. We would have, if we had more time. And, anytime that somebody, asks me this, I really don't want to give an excuse, because I know how that comes off, because no excuse is good enough. And it's something that, has really, really pained me personally in making this film, was that we did not accurately or, even respectfully cover transgender people as much as they deserve to be, and, as much as they should have been, especially in the context of queer games. So, I mean, that's basically the extent that I can say about that, is, it's not something that we were ignorant of or something that we didn't care about. And if we had more control of the film, then, that was like our one top priority, was something that we weren't able to do. So I'm really happy that we were able to get it in there at all. And that, trans people are shown in the film, and their work is shown in the film. And we say that we want this to be an exclusive space for, inclusive space for transgender people. And that's something that's important to us. And that's something that we carry with us.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that.
I'm glad that you also called me out on the transgender topic, because, as much as that sticks out, anybody it's connected with the transgender community, and, that is a glaring omission in the film. We say the word trans, and we say genderqueer, and we show trans people, and that's a step and a mile above, what most people do, but it's not as far as we should have gone.
One thing that was in the movie quite prominently was a lot of gameplay footage. You mentioned David Gayden. BioWare's Mass Effect is featured prominently in the game. And then you also have indie stuff like Anna Anthropy's Dysphoria, and big name stuff like Donkey Kong from Nintendo. Did you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get the rights to include that footage in your film?
Nope, everything was fair use. And we had gone through our lawyer and said, you have to keep the clips to this length, and you can only show, this much at a time, and you have to do it in this way. So everything that we did was squared away under fair use. And companies have seen the film. I know that Riot actually held an internal screening of the film because they wanted to, show all of their employees that, hey, gay people care about what you're doing. So, Riot has been really receptive to it. EA has seen the film, and they're really receptive to it, and they're really happy with how they were portrayed. So no, it was not a struggle, because that was something that, we were able to do legally.
That's great to hear. One of the Kickstarter documentaries I backed was called Stripped, and it was all about comic strips, and certainly they want to feature comic strips in their film. And they had to they had a list that they showed all their backers, like, here are the 300 licenses and permissions we need to get to film this movie. And I can just imagine that certainly was a different situation where they wanted to show comic strips. Maybe those are different rights or fair use or lengths or context, but
comics are very different, because look at a comic for 5 seconds and you've seen the comic, right? Like, that's what they're selling, is the comic. And if you show the comic, then you've already seen it. So
right, you really can't just show a single frame of a comic and still portray or still convey its meaning.
Well, I mean, you can show like a frame of a comic that it lasts 5 seconds, and but then that person's already seen that individual strip. Whereas I can show 5 seconds of first-person shooter game footage, and beyond that little clip, you have no idea what happens in the game, right? And it's not the same experience as actually playing it. But comics are visual, so
that's a good point. You mentioned Riot Games, and they were singled out in your film as a spectacularly supportive company of the LGBT community. Are there any other companies that deserve a shout-out? Within
games, we've had a lot of really cool, discussions, Riot, BioWare, and then also Ubisoft and 2K. They've sponsored the convention in the past. Blizzard is really turning a new leaf and doing a lot of cool things now. I mean, there are a lot, but those are the main ones that have really been able to support us through the convention and do cool things in a big way. I mean, there's been cool examples of queer people in games recently, through Naughty Dog and NetherRealm, and they've done a lot of really really good representation that's introduced in a creative way with really strong narration. MailChimp is also a really cool company outside of gaming, but they've been super helpful and supportive of us. MailChimp and GitHub have been really cool. So.
And are they necessarily being supportive of Gaming in Color specifically, or just of Midboss and GamerX and other events like that?
Yeah, mostly GamerX, because GamerX is the way where we set up, programs for companies to actually come in, and, we give them packages and things, it's really simple. Supporting the film is a much different way. I don't think that we've really explored, how could a company support this film, or, if they were wanting to, they wouldn't probably know how to, but to support GamerX. So
as I mentioned, at the time this episode airs, the movie came out a week ago. What sort of promotion are you doing in anticipation of that? You talked about previously the film was on the independent film circuit, but are you doing additional screenings or interviews or new websites or trailers or anything like that?
Yeah, we actually just hired a publicist company in LA called Green Galactic that we're working with, who are really big in arts and culture down in LA, and they took on our project within the past 2 weeks at the time of this airing. Not a lot of time, and made us a really cool press release and have gotten us out to a lot of great press. So there's a bunch of big articles and interviews coming in. Like this one. I love doing interviews. So hopefully by the time that this airs, those are actually out. So people should know what they are, but I'm really excited about the press push that we're getting. I'm really excited that people are paying attention to the film again. So we're definitely trying to make this a big launch, bigger than our last year's launch. Absolutely. We right now we're in the middle of making a new trailer. So hopefully, ideally that's out right now. That's supposed to come out launch day. And then our new website, which we've been working on. Do you want to take a sneak peek of the new website right now, like a live?
Yes, let's do it.
Live website sneak peek. Okay.
Yes.
Maybe you can give some feedback, because I'm really pleased with how this looks, but it's not going live until the film's out. So.
You just Skyped me a link.
I did.
Let me see if I can figure out how to. Here we go. Click. Ooh, very nice. It's got all the links up there: Press Kit, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, PlayStation, Xbox, VHX, Voodoo. Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, that's actually a question I had for you, is you're launching on all these platforms, and every time I see the list, it always ends with more major platforms to come soon. So what more is there? I mean, it sounds like you're already launching almost everywhere.
There's a big more, actually. A really, really big more. And if this is coming out in a week, it might have already been announced. So it's coming soon. Not the actual release, but the announcement of the big platform is coming soon. So we always say more, and we mean it, because there is cool stuff on the way for Gaming in Color.
Okay, well, I know you can't confirm or deny anything at the time of this recording, but the only major player that I see missing from this list is Netflix, so I'm going to keep an eye out to see if that logo pops up on your new website.
I can actually deny that, because we're actually going for transactional video on demand. So basically the film process is, if you're getting video on demand distribution, first off, you go through transactional video on demand, which includes iTunes, instant video, all of these places where you can actually just buy the film. After that, you go through a different video on demand. I think it's subscriptional video on demand or something like that, which would include Netflix and other things that are subscription based or streaming based or based on a person paying the platform and then accessing your film that way instead of actually directly paying for your film. So that can definitely happen down the line. So this is sort of our first batch. Video on demand is weird. Some of these platforms that we're listing will be on there forever. Some of them we won't be. Some of them could actually be very shortly sustained, depending on how they do and how the platform is, receptive to our product. Film is weird. Film is a weird industry. I've had to learn a lot about film, coming from games and only being in games for such a short time and jumping into film right away. But yeah, Netflix is not something that we would want to do at the same time because then people would not be purchasing the film directly. So that's one thing. Also, the impression that people get when they see a film on Netflix is that it sucks, right?
Is that true?
That is true. I feel like that's true. Anybody who has Netflix can probably confirm this. Anytime that they actually are wanting to see a movie, search for it on Netflix and actually happen to find it, they don't want to see it anywhere because it's probably garbage. Like, why is this on Netflix now? So, I mean, unfortunately, Netflix has lost so much of its catalog that unfortunately, a lot of what it has is not, the big mainstream movies. I mean, so, the impression that you get once you're on it is that, it's either bad or it's cheap. That's why you don't have to pay for it. Like, the impression is that it's free because people are already paying for Netflix, so they don't have to pay anything extra to actually see your film, right? So it's a different model that's not conducive to actually selling directly. And just because we were able to get approved on all of these major platforms, that's not something that we would, and it's not something that our platforms would even want us to do, at the same time in tandem. So.
Interesting. A former guest on this show, Lorian Green, 3 years ago released a documentary all about board games, and her initial release was physical media only, and she eventually released an online version as well, iTunes, Google Play, and the like. But just in 3 short years, priorities can shift. She's now working on a documentary all about pinball, and says that when this film comes out, it'll release initially and perhaps even exclusively on Vimeo. Wow. And then maybe later other platforms like YouTube, which now has a pay-on-demand option as well.
It does.
Cool. Excellent. So I'm looking forward to seeing which options Gaming in Color explores.
Yeah, we'll actually be on video on time on release as well. So.
Oh, okay then. Great.
I believe so. I mean, I feel like that's sort of assumed. Everything's on Vimeo, so
everything.
I might put up a link to that just so people can find it, but I don't think anybody would choose to buy us on Vimeo instead of like a console or iTunes. So
interesting. Okay.
We'll see. Yeah, this is something that I've definitely had to pick up, and Devolver's been really, really super helpful in, explaining this in a way for people to understand, and, why we're, everybody wants their film to, like, get on Netflix, get on Netflix, then people can see it. But fortunately, what we're doing right now is actually a step above that, so.
You've evolved beyond Netflix.
Yeah, something like that.
Excellent. Well, we've been chatting a lot, and in many of the questions I've asked, some of your answers have very often referred to the next time I do this, or the next film, and etc. So what is the future for this topic and its film coverage?
I don't know. If anybody else is ever going to make a film about this, then I hope that they would see Gaming in Color and, maybe reach out to me, and that would be something that I could maybe work with them on. But in terms of actually directing and starting a film on myself, I think that Gaming in Color hasn't really hit its full stride, especially now that we're just getting out on release and putting so much power behind this. I don't think filming again is something that I want to think about for a short while. I mean, I definitely have ideas. I know what I would want to do, and I think there's a game plan there and there's opportunity there. So, we'll see, but I'm not making any plans right now. I am in love with Gaming in Color, and I am fully committed to it, and I want people to see this film, and that's my motivation for the short term.
Excellent. And if people do want to see this film, which at the time of this episode is now out, where do they go?
They can go to gamingcolor.com, which is going to have, or does have, all of our links to all our different platforms, and you can find it easily on iTunes. Actually, at the time of this recording, it is out on iTunes for pre-order right now, but it'll be out, once the episode is out. So iTunes, Google Play, PlayStation, Xbox, Vudu, and VHX. Also, Amazon is in there as well, but I don't know if that's actually going to come out release day. Amazon is a little fickle about when they release, but it's definitely around this period. So.
And I see in iTunes the standard definition version is $7.99 and the HD is $9.99. Will that be pretty consistent across the platforms?
I think that's actually an iTunes thing.
Okay, so what can we expect to pay on other platforms?
I believe it's going to be $9.99 on other platforms. But like I said, I don't control the price. So I wasn't sure if it was going to be $5 or $10. So it turns out it's going to be 8 or 10 on iTunes. So I'm expecting probably the average is going to be around $10.
Yeah, I think HD tends to be the default nowadays anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, most people have HD TVs by now. I ditched my CRT a while back.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, excellent. Well, I think we've covered a lot, and I'm very much looking forward to this film breaking the charts and just doing blockbuster, and I hope it does really well.
Thank you so much. I am excited, and I really hope that people are able to find the film through this, and join the cause and get inspired, and meet some folks. The coolest thing, oh my gosh, I talked about, we were screening on Twitch, so here's a nice little blurb that we can go out on, a nice little bit of positivity. So when we were screening on Twitch, the coolest thing happened, and I was watching the chat. And I was going around, all of the garbage and slurs and everything. And I start seeing these people, a couple people that were still being active in the chat. And they were like, this is really interesting. I've never seen anything like this. I'm gay and I love video games, but I've never really thought about, combining those. I've never had anybody else gay to play with. And while they were discussing these things, I saw people starting to exchange email addresses and gamer IDs so that they could play with other gay people that they met in the Twitch chat. And they were so excited because they'd never found anybody else gay to play video games with.
Wow, that's really moving. You, just in the act of producing this film, are, wow, bringing people together.
It was one of the coolest moments that I have ever experienced. Was seeing it happen right before my eyes, where not only were their perspectives widened, but they realized something about themselves, and right within that, they were able to bond and create a new connection with another human being over video games. And it was so important to them that they had finally found another gay person to play video games with, because they'd never experienced that before, and they didn't even think it was real.
And that's one of the best things video games can do, is bring people together, and it's been so frustrating to see the opposite happen these past few months, that to see Gaming in Color reversing that trend, it's very encouraging.
Yeah, I think that, I want to show people that this is real, and this is something that anybody can do, no matter who you are. And that's what I'm continuing to fight for.
Well, thank you for taking up that fight. We much appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been Polygamer, a Gamebits production. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback at polygamer.net.
Two quick questions for you. One, you mentioned you're non-binary. Which pronoun should I use when writing up the promotion for this podcast?
Yeah, I prefer singular they, them.
Okay. And also, I was insensitive. There may have been times during the interview when I referred to you as sir.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I'm used to that. It's not, it's not something that I like or assign to myself. So,
Okay. If I can, I'll edit those parts out.
Thank you. That's really appreciated.
I should have thought of it an hour ago. One of the reasons I started this podcast is because I have a very limited perspective and experience, and I'm hoping to meet people who will help me be less of an asshole.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate your patience with that.